Nobody at the gala noticed the old man eating alone in the corner. 300 people in a hall in Boston, in gowns that cost more than a used car, and not one of them looked twice at the man in the gray suit at the small table near the service door. The worst table in the room. The one nobody chooses. The one you get when you arrive without a name that matters. He ate his dinner quietly. He thanked the young woman who refilled his water. He watched the room the way you watch a fire, with a kind of soft attention, like he was looking for something in it. The woman running the evening had already decided he was a problem. She had already, twice, sent someone to ask him to leave. And then, at 9:15, the host walked to the microphone, tapped it once, and said that for the first time in 25 years, the founder of the foundation was in the room tonight, and that he would like everyone to please welcome, in person, a man most of them had spent their careers thanking without ever seeing his face. He said the name. And the old man in the corner, the one they had tried to remove, set down his fork and stood up. What that name meant to the woman who had tried to throw him out, and what he did with the next 10 minutes instead of destroying her, is the whole reason I'm telling you this. There is a hall on Boylston Street in Boston called Ashford Hall, and on one night in October, it held the most important people in the city, and the most important person in the building was the one they couldn't be bothered to see. Ashford Hall was built in 1911 by a railroad family, and it has spent the century since being the room where Boston decides who belongs. The ceiling is 40 feet of gilded plaster. The staircase is a river of marble. When the chandeliers are lit, and there are 9 of them, each restored at a cost the foundation's own newsletter had once, tactlessly, printed. The whole room glows the color of old money, which is a color, if you have ever stood in it, that you do not forget. That night it was the 25th anniversary gala of the Alden Foundation. For a quarter of a century, the Alden Foundation had done one thing, and done it better than any organization of its kind in the country. It found children with extraordinary gifts and no means, kids from housing projects and mill towns and immigrant apartments, kids with a violin borrowed from a school closet or a voice discovered by accident in a church basement, and it paid for everything. Lessons, instruments, conservatory, living expenses. It had put more than 4,000 young musicians through the doors that would otherwise have stayed locked, and its alumni now sat in the first chairs of orchestras on 3 continents. Every one of those 4,000 knew the name Alden. It was on the scholarships. It was on the practice building at the conservatory. It was, that night, on a banner 30 feet wide behind the stage, and not one of them had ever seen Henry Alden's face. That was the legend of the thing. In 25 years, Henry Alden had never appeared. No photographs, no interviews, no stage. He had given, by the foundation's own count, more than $340 million, and he had done it from behind a wall so complete that half the room that night privately believed Henry Alden was a name on a trust, and nothing more. A fiction, a shell, a convenient story for a fortune whose real owner preferred the dark. There was a chair reserved for him every year, at the head table, with a small folded card that read Mr. Alden. Every year it sat empty. Every year the MC made the same warm joke about it, and everyone laughed, and the evening went on. That night, the chair at the head table was empty as always. Because Henry Alden was sitting at the worst table in the room, by the service door, eating his dinner alone and watching. He was 81 years old. He wore a gray suit that was clean and pressed and about 15 years out of style. His shoes were polished and old. He had arrived at the door at 6:40 without a printed invitation, given his name to a young volunteer who did not recognize it and could not find it on the list, and rather than make a scene, he had simply said, "That's all right. I'll just sit anywhere. I don't need a fuss." And the flustered volunteer, seeing an old man in a cheap suit and no name on the list, had walked him to the one empty seat nobody would miss. He had come to see it. That was all. 25 years of writing checks in the dark, and he had finally wanted, just once, to sit in the room his money had built and see with his own eyes whether it had become something worth building. He had not told the foundation he was coming. He had not told anyone. Which is why the woman running the evening had no idea who she was dealing with when she decided the old man in the corner was ruining the aesthetic of her gala. Her name was Vivian Crest, and she was the foundation's executive director, and she had waited her entire life to be the woman standing at the front of a room like this one. She was 43. She wore a midnight blue gown she had chosen 8 months in advance and a string of pearls that had belonged to no one in her family. Because no one in her family had ever owned pearls. She moved through Ashford Hall that night with the specific, brittle precision of a person who has learned every rule of a world by studying it from the outside. Which fork, which greeting, which laugh, how long to hold a handshake, how to make the staff disappear. She had learned all of it. She performed all of it flawlessly, and underneath every flawless second of it was a terror so old and so deep that she had stopped being able to feel it as fear and only felt it now as contempt. Because Vivian Crest had grown up with nothing. She had grown up in a third-floor apartment in Lowell with a mother who cleaned offices at night and a father who had left. And she had grown up with a gift, a real one, a voice her choir directors said came along once in a generation, and no possible way in the world to pay for what a gift like that required. And when she was 17 years old, a letter had arrived. The Alden Foundation was pleased to offer her a full scholarship. Voice, the conservatory, everything. She had been Alden Scholar number 47. She never told anyone that. Not at the foundation, not at the galas, not to the board that had hired her. In the official story, Vivian Crest was a development professional with 2 decades of nonprofit leadership. In the true story, she was a scholarship kid from Lowell, who had once stood in a church basement audition in a dress her mother had sewn from a pattern, and who had felt, for years afterward, the particular shame of being helped, the way the other students at the conservatory had said, "Oh, you're one of the Alden kids," with a smile that was almost kind, and never quite. She had sworn, somewhere in those years, that she would never again be the one who was pitied. She would be the one who decided. She would stand on the inside of the door and hold it, and she would never, ever let anyone see the girl from the third-floor apartment. And her voice, the once-in-a-generation voice? It had cracked, permanently, in her second year. A medical thing, a small, cruel thing, nothing anyone could have prevented. She never sang again. She turned to running the machinery of the thing she could no longer be, and she was brilliant at it. And she hated, with a purity she never examined, anything in a room that reminded her of where she had started. So when Vivian Crest, at 8:50 that night, doing her final sweep of a flawless gala, saw an old man in a 15-year-old suit eating alone by the service door. An old man who plainly did not belong, who had no business at a $2,500 a plate table, who looked, if she was honest, like exactly the kind of person the foundation was supposed to help and never ever seat among the donors, something in her went cold and certain. "Who is that?" she said to the events manager. Not a question. By the kitchen. Who let that in? The events manager didn't know. Nobody knew. He wasn't on the list. Vivian had already sent a volunteer over once, around 8, to gently ask if the gentleman was in the right place. Henry had smiled and said he was fine, thank you, and the volunteer, disarmed, had come back and reported that he seemed harmless. Harmless was not the point. The point was that there were photographers. The point was that in 9 minutes the MC would begin the program, and the wide shots of the room would include, at the edge of every frame, a shabby old man at a bad table eating rolls. And that was not the image of the Alden Foundation that Vivian Crest had spent 8 months building. So this time, she went herself. She crossed the room in her midnight gown, and she stood over the small table, and she looked down at Henry Alden with a smile that had nothing behind it. "Sir, I'm the director of the foundation. I'm afraid there's been some kind of mix-up with the seating. This is a private event, invitation only, ticketed months ago. I'm going to have someone walk you out, and we'll make sure you get home safe, all right?" Henry Alden looked up at her. He looked at her for a moment longer than was comfortable, not angrily, not even with surprise, but with a strange, quiet attention, as if her face were answering a question he had been carrying for a long time. "That's kind of you," he said. "But I think I'll stay for the program, if it's all the same. I came a long way to see it." "It's not all the same, actually." The smile stayed. The voice cooled. "I don't know how you got in, but you're not on any list, and this isn't the place for." She stopped herself and chose the crueler word by choosing to soften it for someone in your situation. "There are services. I can have someone give you a card. But you can't be in this room tonight." At the next table, a girl of 17 in a black concert dress had gone very still. Her name was Grace Okonkwo, and she was an Alden Scholar, this year's a cellist. The one who would be performing during the program in about half an hour. The reason she was seated near the stage in a dress her mother had pressed 3 times that afternoon. She had noticed the old man an hour ago. Because she noticed people who sat alone, she knew the feeling. She had, at one point, quietly brought him a plate from the dessert table before the servers reached his corner, and he had thanked her by name after reading it off the little placard on her dress, and asked her what she played, and when she said cello, his whole face had changed. Softly, like a light coming up in a room. Now Grace watched the director of the foundation that paid for her life tell an old man he was not welcome in it, and she felt something rise in her chest that she was too young and too frightened to let out. Henry Alden set down his fork. He folded his napkin. And he did not argue. "All right," he said gently. "I don't want to be any trouble." He began, slowly, the way 81-year-old men rise, to get up from his chair. He never made it out of the room. Because at that exact moment, 9:15, the MC tapped the microphone, and the lights came up on the stage, and the program began. The MC was a man named Charles Renner, and he had chaired the foundation's board for 19 years, and he was the one person in Ashford Hall who knew what was about to happen. He had received a note, delivered to him personally at 6:50 that evening, in a hand he had seen only on the bottom of letters for 2 decades. It said only, "Charles, I'm here, tonight. Corner table by the kitchen. Don't announce me until the program. Let me watch a while first. H.A." Charles Renner had spent the last 2 hours in a state of quiet electricity, because in 19 years he had never once been in the same room as Henry Alden, and he had told no one, because Henry had asked him not to. Now he stepped to the microphone, and he found the corner table with his eyes, and he saw the old man half risen from his chair, and he saw Vivian Crest standing over him, and he understood, in a single sickening instant, exactly what he was watching. "Good evening," Charles said. His voice was not quite steady. 25 years. The room quieted, and turned to the stage. 25 years ago, a man none of us had ever met wrote a check that changed the life of a child in Worcester who could not afford a clarinet. And then he wrote another. And he never stopped. 4,011 children at last count. $340 million. Given quietly, given anonymously, given without ever once. Not one single time in 25 years asking to stand in a room like this one and be thanked. Vivian Crest at the corner table felt the first cold finger of something touch the back of her neck. Every year, Charles went on, we set a chair for him. And every year it stays empty, and I make a joke about it, and you laugh, and he, wherever he is, lets us. Because that is who he is. Charles looked directly at the corner now. His voice broke, just slightly, and he let it. But not tonight. Tonight, for the first time in the history of this foundation, the man who built everything you see in this room is here, in this hall, with us. He lifted a hand toward the service door, toward the worst table, toward the old man in the gray suit. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and welcome the founder of the Alden Foundation, Mr. Henry Alden. For one full second, nobody moved. Then 300 heads turned, all at once, toward the corner by the kitchen, toward the old man in the 15-year-old suit that Vivian Crest was, at that very moment, standing over, mid-sentence, in the act of having him removed. And Henry Alden finished standing up. The silence in Ashford Hall was the loudest thing in Boston that night. 300 people, the wealthiest and most cultured in the city, understood simultaneously and completely what they were seeing. That the man they had ignored for 2 hours, the man at the worst table, the man their director was in the middle of throwing into the street, was the man whose name was on the 30-foot banner, the man whose money was in their instruments, their careers, their children's educations. The man they had spent the entire evening thanking in the abstract while he ate rolls alone 8 feet from the kitchen door. The applause, when it finally came like a wave hitting a wall. It did not build. It broke. 300 people surged to their feet, and it went on, and it had something desperate in it, the sound of a room trying to apologize with its hands for something it could not take back. And Vivian Crest stood frozen in her midnight gown beside the old man, with the words "You can't be in this room tonight" still hanging in the air between them, and felt her entire life come apart at the seams in front of everyone she had ever wanted to impress. Henry Alden did not look at the room. He looked at her. And here is the thing that the video usually gets to and stops at. The reveal. The delicious horror on the cruel woman's face. The vindication. But the reveal is the easy part. What Henry Alden did next is the part that actually matters, and almost nobody does it, and it is the reason his name was worth putting on a building. He leaned toward Vivian, close, so only she could hear it under the applause, and he said, "Don't run. Come with me a minute. Just you and me." And he offered the woman who had just tried to have him thrown out his arm. He walked her, in front of everyone, out through the service door she had seated him beside, into the back hallway, past the kitchen, into a small anteroom with a coat rack and a folding table, and the muffled thunder of the applause still going on the other side of the wall. He sat down in a folding chair. He gestured for her to take the other. Vivian did not sit. She stood against the wall with her arms wrapped around herself, and the flawless director was gone. And what was left was a woman waiting to be destroyed. "Just do it," she said. Her voice had lost all its polish. "Whatever you're going to do. I humiliated you in front of the entire board. I tried to throw you out of your own gala. Just fire me, sue me, say it out there, I don't care. Do it. Sit down, Vivian, you know my name. I've known your name, Henry said, for 26 years. She stared at him. Number 47, he said gently. Lowell, voice. Your mother sewed your audition dress from a McCall's pattern. You wrote that in your essay, the one that came with your application, and I read every essay, every year for 25 years. And I have never forgotten yours. You wrote that you wanted to sing so that your mother would never have to clean another office at night. You were 17 years old, and you wrote that. His old eyes were very kind. I know exactly who you are. I have known who you are since before you knew who you were. Vivian Crest sat down in the folding chair because her legs stopped holding her. I heard about your voice, Henry said. Second year. I'm sorry. That's a grief most people will never understand, to lose the one thing. I've watched a lot of my kids lose the thing, one way or another. It's the hardest part of what I do. He folded his hands, and I watched what you did after. You didn't disappear. You took everything you had and you poured it into keeping the door open for the next child. Do you know how many kids have gone through this foundation on your watch? 1,100. You did that. Vivian, the girl from the 3rd floor in Lowell, did that. She was crying now. Without any of the control she had built her whole life around, the way you cry when something you have been holding for 40 years is finally, unbearably set down. I didn't want. She got out. I saw you, and I saw where I came from, and I couldn't. I know, Henry said. I know exactly what you saw. You saw a poor old man who didn't belong, and you needed him gone. Because if he could be in this room, then so could the girl in the homemade dress, and you've spent your whole life making sure she stays outside. He leaned forward. Vivian, I built this whole thing so that girl could come inside. She's the only person I ever built it for. Don't you dare keep throwing her out. For a long moment, the only sound was the applause finally dying down on the other side of the wall, and a woman in a midnight gown weeping in a folding chair over a truth she had never once said out loud. Why? She finally asked. Why do you do it? $300 million. Anonymously, for strangers' children. Why? Henry Alden was quiet for a moment. When I was 9, he said, we lost everything, and a man I never met paid for a piano teacher for me for 1 year. 1 year. I never learned who he was. I've spent 60 years trying to be him for somebody else. He smiled. That's all it is, Vivian. It's not complicated. Somebody opened a door for me once and never asked for anything. I've just been trying to hold it open ever since. The trick is, you have to be willing to do it without anybody clapping. Most people can't. That's the only rare thing about me. They came back out together. Henry Alden walked back into Ashford Hall with Vivian Crest on his arm, and the room, which had not known what to do with itself for 10 minutes, went silent again. And Vivian did the bravest thing she had ever done. She walked to the microphone, in front of the board that had hired her, and the donors she had courted, and the photographers she had feared, and with her makeup ruined and her voice, the ruined voice, the one that would never sing again, shaking, she told them the truth. My name is Vivian Crest, she said. And I was Alden Scholar number 47. I grew up in a 3rd-floor apartment in Lowell, and my mother cleaned offices at night, and this man, she turned to him, paid for my entire life. And I never told any of you, because I was ashamed of where I came from. And an hour ago I tried to throw him out of this room because he reminded me of it. She stopped. She made herself finish. I've had it exactly backwards. All of it. And I'm going to spend whatever I have left trying to get it right. Nobody clapped, at first. And then Grace Okonkwo, 17 years old, in her pressed black dress, stood up. And then the room stood with her. Henry Alden slipped out during the standing ovation. Of course he did. By the time the applause turned to look for him, the corner table was empty. The gray suit was gone. And the old man who had built everything in that room was already in the back of a plain sedan heading for the airport, having stayed exactly long enough to see what he needed to see, and not 1 minute longer. He never gave a speech. He never took the stage. He never let a single photograph be taken. To this day, there is no verified photograph of Henry Alden's face. He just wanted to see the room. And then he went home. Here is what happened after. Grace Okonkwo played her cello that night, 20 minutes after all of it, with her hands still shaking, and she played so well that a conductor from Amsterdam who happened to be in the room asked to hear her again the next morning. She is 19 now. She studies in Berlin. She writes to Vivian Crest once a month, and she has told her, more than once, that the reason she found the nerve to stand up first that night was that somebody had to, and she remembered being the person nobody stood up for, and she decided not to be a person who stayed sitting. Vivian Crest did not resign, though she offered to that night, and again in writing the next morning. The board refused it. She is still the executive director of the Alden Foundation, and she has changed it in ways that have made it, by every measure that matters, better than it has ever been. 6 weeks after the gala, she started a new program. It is called the Second Chair Initiative, and it does something the foundation had never done. It finds the alumni, the scholarship kids who grew up, who made it out, who are now doctors and teachers and, yes, sometimes, executive directors, and it asks them to come back and mentor the children coming up behind them, so that no Alden kid ever again has to feel that being helped is the same as being pitied. 1,100 alumni signed up in the first year. Vivian runs it herself. She tells every new class of scholars, on the first day, the same thing. I was one of you. I was number 47. And there is no shame in the door somebody opened for you. The only shame is refusing to hold it open for the next one. She keeps her old audition photograph on her desk now. The homemade dress. She stopped hiding the girl from Lowell. People who have worked with her for years say she is, somehow, both softer and stronger than the woman they knew before, as if setting down the things she was carrying let her finally stand up straight. And Henry Alden kept giving, quietly, from behind his wall, exactly as he always had. He never came to another gala. But every year, at the 25th anniversary table, there is still a chair set for him, with a folded card. And every year, now, Vivian Crest raises a glass to the empty chair and does not make a joke. She tells the room the true story of the night the founder came and what he taught her in a coat room in 10 minutes. And then she says, the thing he said to her, the thing she has made the whole foundation live by, you have to be willing to do it, without anybody clapping. Henry Alden is in his late 80s now. As far as anyone knows, he is still holding the door. That's the part I keep coming back to. I've told this story a number of times, and the moment people always want to talk about is the reveal, the name, the turn, the woman's face when the old man in the corner stood up. And I understand it. It's a satisfying moment. It's the moment we all secretly wait for. The one where the person who looked down on someone finds out exactly who they were looking down on. But that moment isn't the one that stays with me. The one that stays with me is that Henry Alden gave $340 million over 25 years, and the thing he wanted most in the world was to not be seen doing it. He didn't want the chair at the head table. He wanted the bad table by the kitchen. He came to the one room in the world built entirely on his own generosity, and he sat in the worst seat in it, on purpose, so that he could watch the thing he made without the thing he made ever turning to look at him. I don't think most of us are capable of that. I'm not sure I am. We want the credit, not all of it. Maybe, not greedily, but we want the person to know it was us. We want to be thanked. We want, at the very least, to be seen doing the good thing. And Henry Alden spent 60 years learning how to do good with the specific, deliberate willingness to never be seen doing it at all. He said it was the only rare thing about him. I think he was right, and I think it's a great deal rarer than he let on. So here's the question I can't put down, and I'll leave it with you the way he left it with her. Could you do it without anybody clapping? I'd like to think I could. I'm honestly not sure. But I know it's the thing worth trying to become. This story is a work of fiction. Henry Alden, Vivian Crest, Grace Okonkwo, Charles Renner, the Alden Foundation, and every place and event in it were created for this narration. Any resemblance to real people or organizations is coincidental. If someone once opened a door for you, a teacher, a stranger, someone who paid for something and never asked to be thanked, tell me about them in the comments. Say their name. This whole channel is really just a long way of saying theirs. If this story moved you, send it to one person tonight who needs the reminder that the quiet good they do counts, even when nobody's clapping. And if you want more stories told this way, slowly, and with respect for everyone in them, subscribe, and I'll have the next one waiting for you. Take care of each other. I'll see you in the next one.